Hi, and thank you for watching this video. The purpose of this video is to give a walkthrough of my first computer programming project with FlatIron Software Engineering Bootcamp. This is a CLI project, which is command line interface, and it is using basic Ruby code. So pretty simple concept, and the program itself is designed around HTML scraping, which I'll show you in a minute. Uses a gem called Nokogiri to scrape data from the web and bring it into essentially the Ruby program, which will display the data to the terminal for the user to see. So the concept is pretty basic. However, the process of actually doing it took some time and a lot of learnings involved as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start walking through the process here. So first off, I went ahead and opened up a brand new IDE page here. This is basically the IDE where I did my coding. This is provided by FlatIron, and it's essentially an Atom IDE, but it's been configured for FlatIron specs. So the first thing I have to do is I open up the IDE and it's blank. Essentially none of the code actually lives on my computer here, so I've got to go out to GitHub and go ahead and bring that down. And so I've already logged into GitHub. This is my repository where the code actually lives. And I'm going to go ahead and minimize the video here. But essentially, I've got all my code stored on GitHub, so I can clone it and pull it anytime I need it. So I'm going to go ahead and clone it down and go ahead and copy that link there and go back to my IDE. And I want to go ahead and execute some git commands here. So git clone, and I'm going to give it the link to my repository, and it should go ahead and clone it down. All right, and it looks like it did it. So I'm going to go ahead and use these file browser toolbar here. So you can see here basically my project directory structure. All of my code is actually inside the lib folder. I've got two files, command line interface.rb and scraper.rb. These are essentially the two files where all my code lives and is executed from. The rest of these files were created when I used the bundler command to essentially create my gem. And I've updated the README and some of these other files as well, but essentially all the code lives in these two files. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate toward my project so I can execute it. And let's see. Okay, and then I want to go to my lib folder. All right, and there's where my two files are located. So now I'm basically ready to execute. And the way I've essentially designed this program is, in order to run it, I run and execute the command line interface.rb file, which will then execute, it'll call the scraper file as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and execute it, and then I'll sort of walk through the code in a minute. But to execute the program, type in Ruby command line interface, and there we go. So the project that I did, I'm a very avid surfer, and I love surfing around the world. One of my favorite places to surf is in Costa Rica. And coming up with an idea for the project, I thought it would be kind of cool to essentially create a program that would go out and pull daily surf forecast data in order to display it to the user. Because in the surfing world, conditions are everything. So we tend to look at forecast data for weather and surf in order to decide when and where to go surfing. So it's a pretty important info, and thought it'd be kind of cool to play around with it in a program. So essentially, when I run the program, I have a little prompt here, welcome to the Costa Rica Daily Surf Report. And then the user is displayed with a list of, essentially, these are provinces within Costa Rica. I call them surf regions, but they're technically provinces. So you sort of have to have an idea of the geographical layout of Costa Rica, but for somebody who's using this program, they would probably already know that. So essentially, I can choose 1 through 5 here as my option. So if I just select 1, which is the Gulf of Nicoya, what the program is doing is it's going out and parsing the data from a website, which I'll show you in a minute, to pull in a list of surf spots now that are located within the Golfo de Nicoya province of Costa Rica, since I typed in 1. So now the user essentially is presented with another level menu to decide where they want to see forecast data from. So I've got a list here of 16 surf spots within that region. I'm going to go ahead and select number 12, which is Playa Santa Teresa. So type in 12, hit enter. And below there now, I've got a current daily surf report for Playa Santa Teresa in Costa Rica. See here, I've pulled in the weather, the air temperature, sea temperature, the current wind conditions, and then the swell, which in surfer lingo is basically the size of the waves. And these 20s and 9s are referring to the periods of the swell. And actually, this is a really nice swell that's looks like it's hitting right now. 20-second period signifies a pretty strong swell. I've also got the tides here. Tides are important for certain spots. Certain spots perform better on low tides. Certain spots perform better on high tides. So this would all be information that would be really useful to a surfer. And so below that, I added an option on the program to essentially select another forecast or exit the program based on what they want to do. So if the user was like, okay, I want to see what another spot's looking like, go ahead and press 1, hit enter. And essentially what the program does is it just loops through and repeats the same thing that you saw before. Again, you're presented with the list of provinces. So let's say we were looking at a different province. We want to go to number 5, Central Punta Arenas province. So I hit 5, enter. And now I'm presented with a new list of surf spots that correlate to that province. So I can go ahead and let's just pick number 7, Playa Hermosa. Hit enter. And there we go. Now we've got a list of a surf report for a different beach in Costa Rica. Again, showing the tides, the swells, the winds, etc. So pretty simple. One thing I did do is I kind of made it so that the program would only respond to inputs that it was expecting. For instance, on this menu, your options are number 1, number 2. So if the user decides, let's say number 6, well, the code actually throws it back into the same menu display that you saw before. So it'll essentially keep repeating the menu until you select a valid option. And this functionality is incorporated into essentially all the menus. So here I'm back at the first level menu. If I type in 10, it's going to repeat the menu again because I'm only able to select 1 through 5. So I went ahead and put that functionality in because I thought it was important so that somebody didn't randomly make a typo or hit a random key and then you just exit the program, because that's kind of not very complete in my eyes. So in any case, when the user is finished with displaying the data, they go ahead and type 2, hit exit, and we've exited the program. We're back to the terminal screen, or the terminal prompt, I guess. So now I'm going to go show you the code that I'm Actually, let's look at this website that I'm pulling data from, because that'll kind of be nice to see before we actually jump into the code. So the website that I used to pull data from is called Magic Seaweed. It's a essentially a surf forecast website. It's probably one of the best out there in terms of data quality, and it's updated, by the minute probably. The data's essentially real time, and so anyway, this website actually has surf report data from spots from all across the world. I just happened to choose Costa Rica because it was one of my favorite spots. And so the first, essentially the first level of the program, I'm parsing data from this this page called Central America South Surf Reports and Surf Forecast. And the data that I've actually parsed is down here on the left in this menu where it says Costa Rica surf areas. And these 5 areas or provinces of Costa Rica, what I've essentially targeted. So I wrote code to come in here and extract this data. And what I really extracted was the name of the province and then the URL link to whatever province, associated with that name. So essentially the code will go and extract that info, and then it will present it to the user. And based on what the user selects, it will then go to one of these areas. So if the user were to select Golfo de Nicoya, go and click on that. And now I'm brought to a second level menu, or second level page in this case, where I'm focusing down to the Golfo de Nicoya province of Costa Rica. Within that province, I have a list of surf spots that all are located in that area. So again, the user, like you saw before, is now presented with a new menu or a new list and has to decide what surf spot to see. And again, the data that I'm extracting from here is just the name of the surf spot and the URL link. So if I click on Playa Santa Teresa, this is the actual surf report data that I'm pulling in. And we're looking at data for Playa Santa Teresa, Costa Rica. And essentially all of the data that was displayed in my CLI program comes from the top of this page. And specifically, the weather data is essentially located here. So I've got the wind data, I've got the air and seawater temperature data, the swell data, which is broken up into primary and secondary swell. So it's essentially pulling this. And here's where I have my tide info. So I've essentially used the data directly from this page and was able to go and look at the HTML and CSS code in order to see which selectors I needed to pull that data in. So that's essentially how this program is structured. So if we go look at the code now, since I start program by executing command on interface.rb file, we'll go ahead and start there. I've got some require info up here at the top, pointing to different the scraper file, and then requiring Nokogiri and pry, so that I can scrape data and then troubleshoot as well. So I created a class command line interface. I gave it a couple of attributes. When I initialize a new instance of command line interface, I am initializing it with a couple of empty hashes and also storing instances into an array called all class array. I've got some different methods here. This one is just to clear the array, the all array, and the run method is an important one because that's actually how my program is really gives a program the order of which methods to execute and essentially controls what the user will see. So the first thing that the program will do is we'll create a new class of scraper, which we'll look at in a minute in the scraper RB file, and it executes a method off of that. The next menu here is a surf region menu, which now is, in this case, is a method. And this is essentially the first level menu of my program. You can see here it puts out welcome to surf, Costa Rica's daily surf report. This is all what the user sees. And then below that is the actual data that what this does is it's referring back to the scraper class, which does all the HTML web scraping. And essentially what this code is doing is it's iterating through the HTML CSS array created by Nokogiri and displaying that data to the user. So essentially what this command line interface file does is really it's a display file. It's there to take data and format it for display purposes. So I've got in here and given options for the user to input, which I use the gets method with chomp at the end. And I've written some conditional statements here based on what the user would do. Enter, this is essentially checks to make sure the user is inputting a available option and not just some erroneous key. And so once I pass that first level menu, I'm jumping to the surf spot menu, which in our run method here is the second level menu. And essentially it's the same kind of concept. Again, we're referring back to the scraper class and going to display all the data from our HTML, CSS scraping. And once the user selects an option here, we will execute the essentially the last part of the menu, which will basically give it the surf spot data that we're referring to. And after the surf spot data is displayed to the user, the last menu that the user will see is the another or exit method, which all this method does is gives the option to loop through and see another forecast or exit the program. And run the code here to do that. I made sure if the user just selects to see another forecast that I'm clearing all of my arrays and classes so that none of the previous choices will end up running into the new method call essentially. So we'll look at the scraper file here. This is where sort of all of the web scraping and data is coming from. Again, I've got some requires up here. I'm creating a new class called scraper, giving it a couple of attributes, some empty hashes, and storing all instances into an array. I've used a constant here called base path, and this is essentially the Magic Seaweed URL, the base website. And from there, I'm doing my typical methods here, class methods. I've also got a run method here, which this run method essentially calls a instance method for the scraper class, and you can see that here using the HTML open and Nokogiri commands, gems essentially to parse data from the Magic Seaweed website. This is essentially the Magic Seaweed website that I showed you a minute ago with all the provinces. And the code here is these are all CSS selector commands built into Nokogiri in order to select and extract certain data. And this one is extracting again the title of the province and the URL of that province. All this data is stored into arrays from Nokogiri, and then I'm iterating through them and storing them into hashes, which I can use to display the data. I've got the next menu here. This is the second level menu where I'm getting a list of surf spots associated with a certain province, iterating through that data again to display the data. And the last menu is the surf spot page. So this is where the actual surf report, surf forecast data is going to be parsed. I've got essentially the wind, the weather. This is the swell data right here, and then the tide. So these are all CSS selectors that I've been able to identify from the website and get the data I need. So essentially, that's how the program works. The scraper file does all the hard work of the program to parse all the data, and then the command line interface file references that via calling the scraper class methods to pull the data and puts it out to the user on the terminal. So pretty simple concept as far as programs go. However, probably the biggest challenge of this was trying to figure out all of the correct syntax to use for the HTML, CSS scraping to get the data I needed. That was very time consuming, and learned a lot about Nokogiri and just web scraping in general. Creating these classes and things like that, these methods was pretty challenging as well, but once I sort of started and got going, it was sort of flowed and made sense. So really good learning experience overall, and I feel pretty proud about creating my first Ruby program. So that's essentially my first FlatIron school programming project, and I appreciate you taking time to watch my video, and hopefully I'll be able to share some new programs coming soon once I get through more of the course. So thank you.